I've been noticing how rich your Instagram and your digital video presence is, and you've been doing
Uh-huh.
a lot of two camera videos where you offer some thoughts and some things that you're thinking about.
Yeah.
And what has that experience been like developing that element of your project and sharing your teachings in that medium?
Well, it seems to me there's different ways the world now listens and it takes information. So we need to use that, don't we? If you want to try and help human beings, you can't just say keep writing little books and things because there's more than just books these days. So even though myself I don't go onto into social media. I mean, I don't need, it doesn't matter. I don't, but I have quite a few things that I do. People who help me put my teachings on, for example, and we have a YouTube channel. But also, someone just, I think a couple of years ago, maybe four now, I can't remember, suggested, why not just a 90-minute, 2-minute little video? I mean, you can say a lot in 2 minutes, and sometimes it's more effective than 1 hour because in 1 hour you will say 1,000 things and you don't remember any of it. But maybe one point expressed directly in 2 minutes can be very, very beneficial. So yeah, why not? It's good. I think every few days I'll do something.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful, and I've
Yeah.
been, I think what an extra added bonus element to what you're offering is that you can revisit it. You can revisit these 2-minute clips, and you can kind of like, and they're really well titled, where you can kind of go back to a topic that you might want reminders on. And speaking of, one that I've come back to a couple times now is your 2-minute talk on opinions and the power of thought, and the power of thought in the sense of people. Uh, you wake up every day and you have an opinion about it. You have an opinion about the day, and uh, there's some guidance towards maybe being aware of that and trying to facilitate a thinking habit of less negativity and a little bit more positivity, or a little
Mm,
bit less attachment to the array of thoughts and opinions that kind of flow
mm,
through you. And I think it's a
mm,
wonderful thing, and I do think that just in the political scape of America, and just like the general way that the world is right now, there are a lot of opinions, and there's a lot of negativity floating around. Um, is there something about that approach where with opinions that you'd want to I guess highlight, because I feel like a lot of people are attaching to political views, are attaching to things that feel really important to them, and maybe having this kind of more detached or more honed towards a positive thing, that they might feel like a little inauthentic to what they think is true and right in a moral sense. I was just kind of curious what you might think about that,
mm.
in how
Well,
people.
I mean, I
Yeah.
think the only way to answer your question is by reminding us, well, in the approach that I take, the Buddhist, that everything, the Buddhist view of karma, which is, if you look into the literature from 2,000 years ago, and before that, even the view of the world that was in the bones of all the beings coming from these great Indian yogis from their own observation, was this view that we have a consciousness that comes from past lives and goes to future lives. This is not just some made up idea. This is from the Buddhist, from the Hindus. As the Dalai Lama says, it was these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago who were the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self. And as we know, they're the ones who created this incredible technique called single pointed concentration that enables you to access subtle levels of your mind. So whatever. So all Buddhism is based on this view of the mind. And then the fundamental point is that the Buddhist view is, as we know, every second of what we think, not to mention of what we do and say, is what produces us. So from the point of view of being beneficial to yourself, there's no advantage in just having also negative opinions. It's just anger, resentment, and then eventually, and also the key point in Buddhist psychology is the negative states of mind, the negative emotions cause us a lot of pain, but also cause everything to be misrepresented. When you're really angry, everything looks really ugly. If you're quite content and fulfilled, things can look quite pleasant. So the way the world appears to you is through the aspect of what's in your mind. So given that whatever you think is what produces you, forget about what it does to others, then it's to our advantage. It's the basis of Buddhist practice, is try and control your mind, not for some fundamentalist reason. It's because you don't want to be miserable. So that's the basis of showing how we never stop having opinions. And then there's all the added component to that is, um, we have an opinion about something because we feel completely obsessive. We think we have to have an opinion about everything. We think we have to stick our nose into everything we see and hear and taste and touch and smell and have an opinion, and that's fine. But if they're not valid opinions, if they're coming from your anger or resentment, well, what are you doing? You're causing yourself misery and you're creating conspiracy theories and making a mess of the world. So that's the basis of all the things I say in my little something to think about videos are basically about how to control our minds, how to discipline our minds, and how to transform our minds. I mean, the Buddha says we've got this amazing potential to have minds that are clear and wise and fulfilled and compassionate. And the method to do that is to work on them and stop all the crazy thoughts and try to develop positive thoughts. I mean, speaking very simply, so that's what's underneath it. That's what drives that one, for example, that you mentioned.
Yeah, thank you. And I know that like to like you have a very rich and thorough history and experience with political activism or just activism in general, whether it's within a feminist movements, Black liberation movements, uh, within like a hippie counterculture. That you have a
That's
lot of
right.
you have a very deep engagement with various causes,
Mm.
and you've continued that. And I watched there's the wonderful documentary Chasing Buddha, which is about your life, and it's a very powerful documentary, and I might touch on that again a little bit later, but it's available on YouTube, and something that was very powerful about what you said about how you have evolved in your life. You've gone from engagement with these political or cultural landscape movements, and all those efforts were based in a want to change the world and to
Mm.
make the world a better place.
Mm.
And as you've evolved and coalesced into a Buddhist practice and a Buddhist lens, being a Buddhist nun has more or less, in at least what was said in the documentary, uh, the being a Buddhist nun is a very sensible and applicable way of being that conduit to change the world. And I was wondering, just to kind of tie back to what we were talking about with opinions and controlling our mind, does change with the world at large kind of start with our own internal understanding of ourselves and our
Well,
thoughts?
I think it really has to. Sometimes we can hear that in a very mysterious way, but I mean, if you want to help the world become more healthy, it starts with you learning nutrition. You can't just leap out there and, dump your ideas onto somebody about how to get healthy. You've got to start with your own mind, changing your own mind, learning nutrition, and putting that into practice yourself. Then you can be of benefit to others. Just, I mean, there's no question. I remember the Dalai Lama often quote him. He says, I mean, they often say in Buddhism, a bird needs two wings, wisdom and compassion. So compassion, if you like, is the action wing, is the political wing, is being out there and being of use to the world. But as the Dalai Lama says, compassion's not enough. That doesn't mean just feeling, meaning well. You've got to be informed by intelligence and clarity and stability in your own mind. So your own self has to come first. It's obvious. In any way that you want to help, you've got to change your own. You got to work on your own mind first. It's so clear to me, I think.
And I like that balance of the two wings. So one, it's like, yeah, you do have to cultivate something in yourself, but there's also this action wing. There's also this element that like brings your what you've developed and worked on into an application. So you're working with other
You help
people
others.
for it.
We live in this crazy world together, don't we? And one of the functions, I think, of ego is that we feel isolated and separate and lonely and or totally self-centered. But as you work on yourself, I think you become the beneficiary of that insofar as you become more fulfilled and relaxed. But also, I think the natural result of that is it breaks down the barriers that ego creates between self and other. So you really realize you are in this world, and of course you have to be of use to the world. I mean, why be of harm to the world? You don't just put yourself together, you've got to put that into practice in the world as well. There's no question. And I think it comes very naturally if because you realize you everything's interdependent. This is the wisdom teachings that we exist interdependently. We don't exist in isolation.
Mm.
So,
And just briefly, I wanted to talk because I want to talk about like your work with prison chaplaincy and your attraction or your interest in working with people that have a similar intense energy, because I think like you had talked about, at least in the documentary, about like this coming to terms with your own uh intense energy kind of helps you speak to and feel comfortable with working with people that are incarcerated and everything. But I did want to also just talk about like when I find, and maybe this is felt elsewhere too, but going a Buddhist path, you're working on yourself. You're kind of vulnerable when you're doing that. You're vulnerable because you're looking at elements of yourself that are shadowy or maybe like not so glamorous or whatever it is, and you're in a vulnerable position. And then I feel like there can be some rawness when someone is hurtful, or you find something, you see something in the news maybe that upsets you like a little bit more, and I feel like that can like create some tension and some tightness that would make it difficult to be compassionate for another person, because well, here I am doing all this work on myself, and you're clearly not, in your head, well, you're clearly not working on yourself. How do you kind of bridge that? How do you bridge this feeling? But how do you open up to having compassion for somebody else that might be making your life difficult, especially while you're working on yourself?
I understand. Well, I mean, that's so we need to look at maybe the Buddhist analysis of the mind. I mean, each of the traditions are different. I don't quite know the approach that you take, but certainly in our tradition, there's a strong emphasis in the in Tibet, the Buddhist monastic university system, where they study the 20, 30 years of philosophy. I mean, that can all sound very theoretical, but practice is based on theories. I mean, you could say that. So the key understanding of the Buddhist mind is, first of all, we're not discussing your brain. That's not Buddha's expertise. I mean, the view as I said, the view coming from India, which is the tradition Buddha came out of, they literally discovered the presence, if you like, of this subtle consciousness, of the capacity for cognition, thoughts and feelings and emotions, which of course are dependent upon a decent brain. But the knowledge in these previous Hindus and the Buddhists is about the actual subjective cognitive process itself, which is very subtle. So when we look into that way of seeing the mind, then we look into the contents of the mind, and the way the Buddhism describes it is deceptively simple. You could argue that there are states of mind that are kind of distressing and neurotic and make us miserable, but also distort the outside world, and they're called anger, attachment, jealousy, anxiety. Nothing fancy about those words, and we all know them very well. We're totally familiar with them. And then you've got the next category of states of mind that aren't neurotic and aren't miserable, but are positive, and if you like, you can call them virtuous: love, compassion, kindness, generosity, forgiveness. We all know these states of mind. Well, in the Buddhist analysis, the first lot, they're the ones that make us miserable, distort us, make us feel separate from others, and they are therefore the ones that cause us suffering. And then when we act on the basis of those, that's when we do whatever we do to harm others. We mightn't be pedophiles and murderers, but we're mean to other people sometimes. We get resentful. We might have a fight with somebody. So when we really come into terms with that, then I know, one, why I'm suffering, why I'm miserable, my own states of mind. But then if I'm brave enough, I'll also own that that's why I do mean things to other people, right? When we're really in touch with that, then when I see other people being mean to me, I know exactly how they feel, because so then if I'm really stable in my practice, not just theoretically, but actually, then I will be able to have enough stability to not get affected by it, and even have compassion for them, because I realize that they're coming from exactly the same place. But that's very hard, because ego is very instinctive. And we want to lash out and think it's not fair and all the rest. It demands a lot of practice. And my feeling is that's the basis of real compassion for others, because, they say that the bodhisattvas and the Buddhas have such compassion for us ordinary beings because we don't realize this. We don't realize that we, in a sense, create ourselves day by day. Dalai Lama calls karma like self-creation. If we really understood the role of our own mind and our own viewpoints and our own emotions on our own life, not just think it's the outside world that makes us happy and it's the outside world that makes us suffer, then we can begin to have empathy for others, I think.
Mm, mm.
Exactly. You've got
And
to recognize it in yourself first.
certainly, and there's something really wonderful too, just that's mentioned in your biography about your experience where you were getting very interested in pursuing martial arts, like you were practicing very deeply, and while you were helping out two people trying to push their car on a street, someone somehow came by and ran over one of your feet, and that totally sidelined your physical capacity to be a martial artist and to practice that. And I'm sure that was deeply upsetting and frustrating and disappointing and all that. And I think that now, from reading your biography, you've since kind of looked back and have been very grateful to that person for having put you in a position where then you'd be recovering in a retreat center and starting kind of beginning your Buddhist practice and beginning your trajectory into where you are now. And so
That's right.
there's a gratitude to a kind of a violent accident and to someone literally harming you. It was likely, I mean, it doesn't sound like it was intentional at all, but like there was something that was hurtful and harmful to you, but and yet there was this kind of compassionate element that you found when you look back in hindsight to
Well, I
it.
mean, more than not as much the compassion one, I think, and this is it's really the way what is seeing when a bad thing. I think the approach there is recognizing when a seemingly bad thing happens. If we're brave enough, we can, if we're open to it, good things can come from it because new doors will open, and that's exactly what happened to me. First, I was devastated that I couldn't do my kung fu, my karate. I mean, it wasn't so much compassion for the guy; it was more I didn't see it then, but then as a result of not being able to do karate, I then saw this poster, went to a class, and here I am all these years later. So I think that's more the one of seeing, of being brave in the face of challenges, not becoming overwhelmed by it. But if we're brave enough, then be open to some new things coming, and good can come from it. Good can come from it. I
Mm,
think.
mm.
Do you understand?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And and speaking of that, like just like there being like kind of like a choice element, like to see these doors being opened
That's right,
as
exactly.
opposed to doors being closed.
That's
Uh,
right. And if we get too stuck in the doors being closed, we just get more and more depressed and more miserable or more and more angry. And then you can't see the new doors. You're completely closed.
Yeah, yeah, and then that's I mean, the you will find a very rich, miserable life if you only perceive the closed doors.
That's
And
right.
that sparked like a memory for me, just like having watched Chasing Buddha. There's interviews that are done with people that incarcerated people that are on death row and otherwise. And one person that is on death row, I believe this was in the Kentucky prison system, they were sharing about how there's a choice with uh, kind of accepting where they are. There's this choice of accepting that they're on death row and that this is a miserable remainder of their life, and they can be guilty and shameful and do all these things for the rest of their life. That's a choice. And then there's other choice of accepting the reality of the situation and moving forward and finding some way to progress and to work and to find a way to use this time to
That's
to be a,
exactly
to
right.
be a benefit.
That's
And
exactly right.
yeah, and I thought that was a very powerful thing because there's somebody in a very extremely difficult, intense
That's exactly
situation.
right. Yeah, yeah.
And that just reminded me of your work. I mean, you've done prison chaplaincy, or you've worked with people that are incarcerated for some time now. And I just wanted to talk about like what draws you to that kind of work, and what are some things that you have learned from your work with them that has informed your work with people that are in
Mhm,
other spheres
mhm.
of the world.
Well, first of all, yeah, it was actually started, this is 30 years ago, I think, and when I was based in California, editing the magazine of the organization that I'm part of. And I got a letter from this young Mexican American Arturo, and it started from there, really. He was in one of these top security prisons up in Pelican Bay, in just northern California, right on the border near Oregon, and it's a top security prison. Things are changing a bit now in California, I've heard, but it was a top security prison where and mainly the people there were like these ex-gangsters, Mexican Americans, whatever. And it started from there. He was in this cell 23 hours a day. He'd been in prison. He told me he'd been in prison since he was 12, in adult prison since he was 16, like 3 life sentences, all this, heavy duty stuff. And he was in this top security prison where he's in 23 hours a day in his own cell. It's a very intense situation, and he read a book by one of my teachers, in fact, and was very moved by the talk of compassion. So he wrote. There was a note in the book to write to our magazine. And that's how it all started. Within a year, I had 40 people writing, and so I ran that. I mean, I don't run that project anymore. I stopped that 15 years ago, but I mean, it still continues. But I still have contact with my friends in prison. So what I so people kept writing. Basically, the project we had wasn't so much going into prisons. I'd go sometimes, but it was mainly letter writing, because I know, especially in the United States, where the numbers in prison are so intense, 10 times more than any per head of population than most other countries, for sure. And so what I noticed over the period was it was poor people, working class, no one with family, money. I mean, I joke, but it's not joking. It's true. I never met a rich person on death row. It's like it's predominantly poor working class people that occupy prisons, and people who had no opportunities and no support. So this seemed to be just the way it was. And so we ended up having a project where we wrote letters. We had many people who would become mentors, visit as well. So the main thing for me that I found so moving from that experience, and I still do, from the few people I now still continue to have contact with or visit, whether they're on death row or in the regular population of prisons, is that when the ones who are the good practitioners are probably better practitioners than most of us, because the irony is they don't have much choice. We seem to have choices, but in the end we make dumb choices because we just don't see the advantages of having freedom to be able to make choices. But they don't have a choice. Their backs are against the wall. Some of these guys are in these cells, in these environments until the day they die. And you can either, be hopeless, and because it is horrible, you wouldn't want to go live in one of those places, garbage places. But you realize when you really are brave enough, like many of the people I know, you can make a choice to change your mind. You can change the world. Basically, there are two things. You've got an external world and you have your mind, your attitude, your viewpoints, your opinions, in other words. And you've only got two options. And, but they make the choice. The ones I admire in prison, my friends, they make the choice to change their mind because they can't change the outside. And I find that very powerful, because if we look into our lives, we can theoretically change the world. We can change a job. We can leave a relationship. But the tragedy is we don't. So if you think about it very brutally, in any situation, let's say when you're not happy, there's really only two options. One is, if you really can't cope with the environment, the boss, the lousy job, the mean person, the relationship that's brutal or whatever, or you just don't, or it's just not working for you, you can leave it. But we mostly are afraid to leave. We're afraid to make that decision. Oh no, I can't leave. It's not possible. I won't get another job. Oh no, I bet what I've got is better than what having nothing. So we end up, and then we think, okay, well, I can't change the job. Let me change my attitude towards the job and see if I can find something good about it. So at least I can be fairly content. No, I can't change my mind. The job is lousy. So we don't change the environment and we don't change our mind. So we all go crazy. That's the thing that's really, I can see this in our daily lives. Whereas my friends in prison, they can't change the outside and they choose to change their mind. So it's very, and so for me, it's an indication of that's really what practice is. I think Shanti Deva or somebody said, if you can change something, please change it. But what if you can't? So in the end we all go crazy because we do neither. We stay stuck in a lousy job and still keep being angry, and we don't realize we can change our mind. We don't realize we can give up the anger for
Mm.
our own benefit, not for a moralistic reason, for our own benefit. So that's for me the big learning from it. And I have great admiration for people who are in these crummy situations that they can't change, but they learn to become happy, content, useful human beings.
Certainly, certainly. And thank you for your work with them, and for offering like a documentary like Chasing Buddha. Like I learned a lot about your life, and there's a lot of vulnerability and tons of honesty from your story, but there's also just these interviews that are in there too from people that are
That's right.
in your community that are also very vulnerable, that are also very honest. And anyway, I just want to anyone that's interested, I highly recommend it, because it just like is a very powerful stories. They're just powerful stories all woven in. And just to go into that element, that here we are, people that there lots of people are afraid of making that choice, afraid of leaving that relationship that they know is not fulfilling, afraid to leave that job that they know is not what they are feeling that they're meant to do or passionate about anymore, or all those things that we remain in. That fear, is it the fear of change? Is it something
Yeah, no.
like
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's a really good, we need to look at it. We really need to unpack what's inside. And I think that's part of our problem too. We don't go very deep into our own minds. We stay quite superficial in our minds. And that, I think, is definitely the real gift that Buddha provides us with, is the incredibly sophisticated skills that enable us to dig deep into the mind, way deeper than I think any of the skills we have in the West in modern psychology. In modern psychology, nothing wrong, and there's marvelous things in modern psychology. The discussion is excellent, and we can look into our relationships. And but in the Buddhist one, it's very, very specific. I think we might sometimes point this out, but I think it's in the Buddhist approach. It's totally personal. It's totally, you're digging deep and unraveling and unpacking your own actual states of mind, not referring to your husband or your father or the lousy job and the things out there that might have caused you some suffering. You're looking into your own actual subjective cognitive process, and you can go incredibly deep there. And then if we do that, we can unpack and unravel what's going on inside us. It's not that easy, you know. So we can see, I think, very clearly. I would suggest that using the Buddha's analysis, I mean, if we're Buddhists, we all know Buddha talks about the three poisons. It sounds almost like a very cute little thing. And what he means is the three major states of mind that are the root of all our problems. There's attachment, and then the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants, aversion or anger. We have attachment and anger, and they sound kind of cute, but the more we understand attachment, the more I think we really do understand why we have all these fears. So I think the attachment here we're describing, this ordinary attachment that sounds so simple, like attachment to cakes and sex and drugs and rock and roll, attachment to the external objects, putting all our energy into the external object, believing when I get that, I'll get happy. But I think at a more subtle level, there's this attachment to attachment to being seen and heard and approved of by others. So I think since we're born, this is very deep inside us, and we're spending our lives um, trying to imagine what it is that other people expect us to be like or expect us to do, and we're afraid to go against that. So, you know, one of the first things, if you should leave your relationship, Robina. Oh, and no, straight away, no, not possible. I can't do that. I wouldn't be approved of it. It'll upset the children, or he will get upset, or my mother won't approve, or the world won't approve. Always fearful of making a decision that might not be approved of by others. I think we're not so conscious of it, but I think it's very primordially deep inside us. We want to try and be seen to be a good girl or a good boy. And then I think just plain straightforward, also simply scared of the unknown, scared of change. Oh no, I can't leave that job. I won't be able to get another job. I won't be able to pay my rent. I can't, because we can't, we're too scared of leaving what's there now, because that's exactly right. We're too scared of change. Change is too fearful for us. So I think it's a multitude of things that prevents us from having the courage to make the tough choices, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Don't you
And
think so?
I appreciate too what you're saying as well, like just that it is deeply personal. Like I think that that's like something that you know, you can read books by various masters and teachers and figures and from a variety of wisdom traditions, or just
Yeah, that's
wisdom.
right. Sure.
And but like you have to apply the tools that you might be reading of those different journeys into.
Into yourself. Exactly. That's
Yeah, yeah. I
yeah.
think that, and it takes so much bravery because there isn't a map for that.
I
There
know
there
exactly.
there isn't anything for that. And I think I had seen you talk about how going the Buddhist path has made has developed a more maybe authentic you, or it can make a more authentic version of you. It makes you more of who you are, and you don't get rid of your personality. You don't get rid of like the your character necessarily,
No,
but
of
you.
course not. That would be very crazy to sort of think you're going to turn into some other kind of person. I think, you know, I always joke and say you can be a loud, bossy person like me, or you can be a very quiet person, but you become a nicer, bossy person and a nicer, quiet person. You don't turn into some weird, different kind of idea. It's too strange, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah, because we've all got a character, we've all got personality. You don't lose that. You just become, it makes it, you become a more fulfilling, more delightful, more useful one, I'd say. Put it that way, you know.
yeah.
Yeah.
And when you find yourself kind of like walking around and having more spontaneous or yeah, otherwise unplanned engagement with passersby, or someone that's like maybe a kid that's like wondering uh why you might be wearing traditional robes, or maybe it's someone in a taxi that is curious about your lifestyle and things like that. um does doing, I don't know how you were before you started doing Buddhist practice, but are you a little bit more open to those spontaneous moments where you are now engaging with the public or just someone else in an elevator or something like that? Or do you feel like you have a lot more stability in your practice to be game for spontaneous things more often than not.
Well, I think if you're not becoming that way, that you're not doing your practice properly. Because I suppose if you look at it from the point of view of being caught up in your own misery and your own attachment, your own anger, your own resentment, and your own fears of what people think, you are very isolated. You'd feel either very shy or very embarrassed or very aggressive around other people. Whereas if you're becoming more relaxed in yourself, more authentic, nothing to hide, in other words. I mean, you don't walk around naked just because you've got nothing to hide. You're still appropriate, but you become much more easygoing, and then you have more of a link with all other human beings instead of thinking, oh, look at him, look at her, or you don't talk to that person because they don't have the same politics as you. You break down all those artificial barriers, you know. I think that's very, I remember the Dalai Lama, there's one particular politician, I can't remember, in the South. He could have I think he might even have had racist background, but he was very compassionate about Tibet. So His Holiness had a really close relationship with him. I remember one time with even George Bush, he said, oh, you know, he said, George Bush, I really like George Bush's ethics and he as a person. I'm not sure about his politics, he said, but he can be very open to somebody. I remember even having a conversation one time on a plane with a person who it turned out, because I like to discuss with people, to be a white supremacist. But I mean, when I was a political activist, I probably would have punched him in the nose, you know, or got angry or left the seat. But here is a human being still, and not to have panic about another person's views and how they just because they're different from yours. So it was interesting just to talk to him and see what he thought and listen to his viewpoints. And do you understand me? Not be so afraid of other differences. You find that the real common bond is our humanity, and I don't mean that very genuinely, you know. And I think the Dalai Lama, that's what he constantly stresses. The humanity is our basis, you know. That's what we all share.
And I remember in the documentary there's a moment where you hold up like a People magazine, like a celebrity pop magazine,
That's right. That's right.
and you're like, oh well, you know, what's the news on the cover here?
That's right.
And there's this moment where you kind of say like, see, this is humanity, like
That's right.
this is it. And here you are, like you're in a center setting. You've got an altar behind you. You're
That's
wearing
right.
this is a otherwise like uh religious ritualistic like space,
That's
and
right.
yet here you are holding a magazine that you can get from a grocery store or a corner store or whatever it is,
Yeah.
and you're saying this is humanity, and you're saying like this is the unabashed uh straightforward human life, and you like it, and you were saying
That's
like
right.
I like this.
That's right.
And you know, I could see some people that are walking a Buddhist path, maybe just beginning or otherwise, and they might think, well, wait a minute, like those pop magazines, those are all rife with attachment. Those are all rife with lust and greed and like it's over commercialized, and
That's right.
that's not what I mean. I'm all about like having less material, and so here,
That's
you know,
right.
and so I guess like when you are experiencing the world, like for yourself, when you have that kind of take where you like human life, it seems like you embrace it, warts and scars and all.
That's it. I think that ought to be the kind of the result. I suppose put it this way: when we start on our practice, we start to note, Buddha talks about attachment, this, and anger, this. You go, oh wow, I recognize that. Oh my God, I recognize that. And so you start to look into your attachment. Let's say let's say I'm attached to buying all my magazines, let's say, and I'm totally attached to it and completely dependent upon it. So then I would at some point, probably in the initial stages of my practice, give up getting People magazine and give up getting because the motivation for it is just because it's just bored. It's like eating food. You realize that you're just driven by this neediness and driven by dissatisfaction. So you might give it up. But at some point when you become more stable, it seems to me, you sort of like you join the world again, you know, and you realize we're all in the same boat. And because you've lessened that neurosis in yourself, you can then see some advantage of being part of the world. I mean, I'm part of the world. I'm not living in a mountain, you know, I live in this world. And so to have a fundamentalist view, oh, I'm not going to read a magazine, you know, that would be and also it depends on your personality. I mean, you can tell that I'm old because I don't look into social media, even though I'm on social media. I don't. I look. I'm because my work is journalism. My work is writing and editing. So I get a lot of information just from reading. I have my New York Times, my. I don't have to get People anymore, but I get subscriptions. New York Times, the Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post. I get a cross section because I like to read. Reading is the human beings. Do you understand me? So it's my way of engaging in the world, of knowing what the hell is going on in the world. I can't live up in my own head. I live in the world, you know. I live in New York City. And the work I do these days, traveling around the world teaching, not so much as I used to, and also editing books and things. I mean, having to speak to other people. If I don't know what the world thinks, how do I know how to talk to other people? It's kind of ridiculous to think that we're isolated and, oh, you know, that's just silly to think that's the result of that's the two wings of the bird. We've got the wisdom wing, which is your inner work, and then that informs your external job, which is to be useful in the world, be in the world, you know, depending. Okay, if I want to go to the mountains, that's a perfectly fine choice, but that's not my style, you know.
Yeah, no, and it makes what you're saying all that much more accessible because
Yeah, sure.
if you were to rely solely on words that were written hundreds of years
That's
ago,
right.
thousands of years
And
ago.
use examples of yaks. I mean, that's ridiculous. I don't live around yaks. You know, I live in New York City. So use New York City examples.
Right,
And the
right.
Buddhist teachings are just living in the past and it's stupid, but they're not. They're just applicable to anywhere you are.
Yeah. And have you found that that when you are in this more stable space, that you can go to the movies or something like that, and you can go to restaurants and you can kind of go and enjoy some of these things that are available just within North American society or otherwise, and enjoy it for its sake? Or do you find that having a uh, Buddhist practice has made it somewhat difficult for you to enjoy art, or somewhat difficult for you to enjoy some things that,
I understand. I understand. I think the
yeah,
key to I think the key to understanding this approach um, has to be to understand the Buddhist model of the mind, you know. So the typical thing that when we talk about, oh, Buddha, samsara, attachment, blah, 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 you know, we all recognize, we all can see our cravings and our hungers and our dissatisfaction, always lonely, always rushing off, trying to find happiness everywhere else, trying to find it in food and people and sex and drugs and video games. We can see that. And that's all really Buddha's pointing out. So then, of course, initially, when you're really starting to look at your mind, you would learn to give those things up because you're just doing it from the point of view of just, you're never satisfied. So it is part of your process that you would. Just like if you're really strongly attached to alcohol, no one's going to ask you to give up attachment to alcohol while you continue to drink alcohol. Do you understand my point? You've got to give yourself some space. So in a way, for me, the wisdom wing is like a retreat mode. You give up those extra things because you need to in order to go inside and really know yourself well. So you don't go to the movies so often, and you don't eat too much cake, and you don't have jump on your boyfriend 4 times a day. You really learn to control your discipline your body and speech in order to develop your mind. But then as you become more stable and more fulfilled and more content, you now start doing the compassion wing, which is about being with other people, you know. So then if someone I mean, from my own side these days, I do teach still and I do travel still, but I do mostly Zoom teachings. But also these days I'm editing books, the books of my teachers. So I'm very content to be in my house. It's like I'm in retreat mode. I live in a very little nice spot in the village on a corner, southeast, with windows on 2 sides, nice treetops. It's like being in the country. I'm totally content, and I mightn't go out for 3 days because I don't have a craving to go out every 5 minutes. And I'm not trying to say I'm such a saint, but I'm very fulfilled doing my work. I do my practice, I do my editing, and then for 3 days I might not go outside. So then if someone calls up and says, you know, would you like to go for a meal, Robina? I'll check if it's useful. Yeah, absolutely. So I'll go for a meal and thoroughly enjoy it. But you don't just do it. You're not doing it out of craving and dissatisfaction. You're doing it because it's useful. It's nothing wrong. You're a human being, but also because it's you working with other people. A person invites me out for a meal. Of course, thank you for your kind gift. I'll accept your gift. So
mm,
it's being in the world as well, but not coming from attachment, not coming from the dissatisfaction and craving.
mm.
That's the point, you know.
And having that balance too of yeah, I mean, like, if you're struggling with some sort of drug or alcohol abuse, and you need time away from it to really
It's
understand.
obvious. And that's the same with food, or, I mean, people these days, we don't call them alcoholics or junkies, but if you're addicted to video games 5, 6, 7 times hours a day, if that's not an addiction, I don't know what is, you know. We don't think of it. We think, okay, if you jump on boys all day, that's an addiction. If you have alcohol all day or food all day, we can see it. It's obvious it's driven by this terrible dissatisfaction and craving and attachment. So it's the same thing. We're all, I mean, in a sense, Buddha's saying we're all junkies. It's just a question of degree, and we've all got attachment. We all
Mm.
have dissatisfaction. That's why we crave external things to make the pain go away, you know?
And
So, yeah.
go ahead. So, yeah. Was there a moment too, like when, because I know that you lived a very uh like engaged life with all the things that you were active in, like all those movements that we were talking about earlier, and then you had the injury to your foot, and you found yourself in a retreat center, and that's where you started to kind of developing your practice and working with your teachers. And I was just wondering if, and I think as that moment was kind of coalescing, and as that reality was meeting itself, you were understanding yourself to be trying to be less attached to wants and desires. I think by 31 you'd been celibate, or you'd started becoming exploring celibacy, and you'd said no more to drugs and alcohol and all these different kinds of things, and that met your introduction to Buddhist practice, I think, just
Yeah, that's right.
timeline wise. Uh,
Exactly.
but when it came to that self-reflective task, that task to now you're abstaining to look within, were there
Mm.
some initial teachings or wisdoms that you got from your teachers that helped you navigate that? Like, was there someone that helped you kind of like understand, like that stood out to you in particular, that really moved you in particular to
Well, I
help you
think,
kind of Mhm.
yeah, I understand. I understand. It's a good point. I think it was just a very natural process. I was moving towards. I mean, it sort of like feels like my life was like an apprenticeship that led me to that point when I was 31 and bumped into, sort of fell into the lap of these two teachers who turned out to be my main teachers, you know. Um, because in the Tibetan tradition, I don't know what your tradition, but in our Tibetan tradition, and within our tradition, within the Tibetan tradition, there's a very strong emphasis on, as we call it, listening to teachings, and listening to the Buddha's teachings in a very clear analytical way. And I've even studied the philosophy intensely. But for me, that's the bait, not just to fill your head with knowledge. That's very captivating in the West, but as a basis for practice, not as something separate from practice. So what I got from the teachings was the view of the mind, and that became the basis. It's like learning the theory of music. Now you have a basis to play music. So for me, hearing the Buddhist view on the mind, this is the revelation. So that's been the basis of any of my practice. My teachers gave it to me from where they were sitting. They didn't come personally. So that, and it was just it with my nature being such that I wanted to always jump. I always jump in the deep end of whatever I do. It's just my nature. So it came naturally. Of course, I'd give up sex, drugs, rock and roll, all the rest, like joking. But it was a very evolutionary, natural process, and so it just made total sense when after I'd met them. I thought, oh, because when I was a little girl, Catholic, I was brought up as a Catholic, and as soon as I went to mass, I remember thinking, "Oh, that's my job. I was going to be a priest." I was so happy, and then they all joked and said, "No, you can't be a priest. You're not a girl. You're not a boy." So I thought, "Oh, okay, I'll be a nun." And then I was totally religious as a little girl. I mean, but naughty at the same time. I was very rebellious. I didn't talk about it. It was just my worldview. I was into God and all this stuff. And I was on my knees when I was a little girl, like 11 or 12, begging my mother to let me be a nun like Saint Therese of Lisieux. I don't know if you've got Christian background. Totally fanatic about it, and I cried. And so it was sort of something in me to always wanting some kind of, I suppose you could call it monastic or could call it internal or whatever view of the world. And then I gave that up pretty quickly. And then 15, 16 started, giving up whatever, all my hippie and then radical left and all that, looking for a way to see the world. So then here I was again at 30, 31. It came very naturally when I fell into their lap. This is what I'd been looking for. So it was a natural next step that I would take ordination and become a nun, a monastic. It totally suited and completely now, still nearly 50 years later, still totally content. It's totally the right choice. It's totally perfect environment for me. Mental, a physical, a mental, an internal environment, really, where I don't have to worry about mortgages and children and husbands and houses and all the rest. That for me is a great delight. So I can totally focus on working on myself and then being useful in the outside world in a very productive way. So it just suits me.
And you certainly are. I mean, like you really are so generous with your time and your energy, and you really put so much energy into sharing the work that you've done on yourself, but also sharing the work of your teachers as it's been applied to you, and
Mm.
then how it can be applied to others. So thank you for channeling all of that energy
Oh, pleasure.
into
So,
and
yeah.
making it accessible. And just wondering, because like you have so much energy, and you put a lot of it into journalism. You put it into you were the head of a magazine, and you're editing books, and you're writing, and you're in correspondence with others, and and that also in tandem with flying all over for a while, flying all over the world, and going to Buddhist centers and teaching and meeting and everything. And I'm just wondering, do you have something in your day that is a restorative element of practice? I don't know if it's meditation or if it's something else, or just a moment that is just you time for you to to restore your battery.
I know, I don't think of it that way. I don't think it needs I don't think I need my battery to be restored. I don't think that way. It seems to give me, I mean, so but I have my daily practice. There's no question. I have, I get up early. I have certain things in the morning. I do at least, yeah, I have small, short sessions throughout the day when I'm at home on my own, where I have my practice. But I don't think of it as restored. I think I need to restore my batteries. I mean, I have a good sleep every night, but I get enormous pleasure from what I do, So it gives me great pleasure. And as part of my practice, I can't really separate it. I've got my own internal, of course I have. Especially in the Tibetan tradition, we have a very strong internal practice, various practices and meditations, and I have all of that absolutely throughout the day and the evenings, finishing the day as well. But my part of my practice is doing the work that I do, and that gives me great pleasure.
Hmm, hmm.
Even when I visited prisons, I didn't find it exhausting. I mean, exhausting or tiring or draining. I didn't find that. It gave me I got encouragement from them, and I. So this is just my personality, I think. If you're into astrology, I've got lots of Sagittarius. It's all out there, kind of rushing ahead, doing this, doing that, blah blah blah. It's just my nature.
Yeah, no, and we all benefit from all of that. Yeah, I was just wondering because things. I guess I suppose it's up to that character, it's up to that personality, right? Because if
Yeah,
you
that's
need
right.
if you need some solitude or if you need some time to recharge or not, but you're just
But
constantly.
on the other hand, but I have that. But I mean, I can be here for 3 days, not saying a word to any other human being, doing my editing. So that's internal, quite content. So if I
Sure.
have to be out there with 1,000 other people, I can be. It doesn't. Yeah, it seems to work for me fine. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And then I've really greatly enjoyed our conversation, and I just had two more questions before we wrap up for today. And one of them is about promotion, just like anything that you'd want to bring some attention to. And I've just, while we were preparing here, I just wanted to bring attention to some of the things that you're doing. You're leading a retreat of teachings and guided meditations at the Ramayan Kandadisa Beach Resort in Bali, Indonesia, from October 29th to November 5th,
Yes,
2025.
that's
And
right.
you can find more information on sharingthedharma.com or your Instagram, Robina Courtin, and that's also a really wonderful resource for finding your videos and finding the things that you've been up to with what you're sharing. You also are a part of the Foundation for the Preservation of the Mahayana Tradition, which is fpmt.org. You also have rubinacourtin.com, and where you have blogs that you've been keeping up with, that they're current, and teachings and links to various causes and things that you're a part of. But I just wanted to offer a space that in case there's something I didn't catch that you can share with people.
No, nothing you said. Everything was fine. You did
Okay,
good.
great. Cool. Wonderful. And
Yeah.
then my last question is, and this is something that we've been talking all this time about, but if there's anything in particular, if do you have any advice for somebody who is walking the Buddhist path right now, that is just beginning it, that you would wish you'd wanted to have heard when you were coming through in the beginning?
I think the big one is to have is to realize how amazing our potential is. And I don't mean potential to be a carpenter or a singer, and we've got that too, but when we really understand the Buddhist view of the mind, how extraordinary our own inner potential is, meaning to be less neurotic and more compassionate and more powerful and more wise and more fulfilled and content, then I think that would encourage us to persevere. Because I think the tragedy of ego, the irony of ego, is that we buy into and believe all the negative stories. I'm hopeless, I can't do it, I'm no good, not possible. But to really know we've got this extraordinary potential, and that we're a work in progress, and it's one step at a time. I think it's really helpful to think that, and then you persevere and not give up on yourself. That's my advice. Persevere.
Venerable Rubina, thank you so much for speaking with me. This is such a treat to talk to you, and thank you for sharing so much of your time and
Good.
for sharing your wisdoms. I mean, this is such a
Wonderful.
wonderful conversation.
Good. And you're doing a great job. So you keep doing it, okay?
We'll do. We'll do. Thank you very much.
Fantastic.